Okay, hello everyone. So this video, this audio should not be too long, but this is really for the men. I suppose it could apply to women as well, but I do think this is especially particularly for the men. So I was just doing some spiritual work, and how you'll have just random thoughts just pop in your head, and it just out of nowhere, it just kind of dawned on me that both. So let's just recap, right? So far God has, I don't, what's the word I want to say? We'll just say shown me, I guess, or presented to me 3 men that he would have allowed me to marry so far, right? And now I'm supposed to bump into number 4, right? So the second guy, I rejected him. I felt no attraction to him really on any level, or not strong enough anyway. And you can speculate, as to whether I'm right or wrong for that or whatever. But now the first guy, we'll just say guy number 1. So guy number 2, I rejected. So we're just gonna kind of put him off to the side. But guy number 1, actually, we might even this might apply to guy number 2 possibly. But so guy number 1, I'm just going to go over some some context, just some details that may or may not be relevant. Guy number 1 was in active ministry. He had a YouTube channel, and his channel just recently got taken down, and he was at a juncture, and that juncture was, okay, what do I do now, God? Right? He tried to create a second channel that got hacked and blocked and so forth, and so he was feeling very discouraged, very probably confused, and he was at a juncture of, okay, now what, God, right? And that was right around the same time that I opened my big fat mouth and told him, or that happened just before I told him that I believed God had told me that him and I were supposed to come together. Now, I wasn't supposed to do that. That was a mistake on my behalf, blah, 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 whatever, right? But the point is that he was at a juncture. He was seeking clarity from God. He was seeking direction from God. And all of a sudden, a woman comes to him and says, I believe that God has shown you to me and confirmed you to me as my future kingdom husband. Now, again, the woman is not supposed to do that. I was in the wrong. I'm not, women are not supposed to be the ones initiating and pursuing. But, let's cut everybody some slack here. None of us are perfect, right? Now, guy number 2 was also at a place of seeking clarity and what his next move was. And God told him to pursue me. And, I had a whole conversation with God about that. And I still wasn't really accepting that guy number 1 had rejected me. I wasn't done processing that. I wasn't ready. Like, literally, guy number 1, I had a dream that he rejected me March 7th, and I think it was exactly 10 days later, March 17th, that guy number 2 pursued me. I was not ready psychologically to even process that. And I asked God, am I allowed to reject him? Is this like an option? And I believe the Lord had told me yes. Now, this is probably going to ruffle a lot of feathers with a lot of people, but I do believe that the Lord actually told me that when it comes to men and women, that there is a difference, that women actually have more leeway or leniency or whatever you want to call it, with got more grace maybe, in terms of rejecting any potential spouses that he sends your way, ordains or whatever. So it's more so that God ordains a wife for a man, whereas a wife more so, I guess, gets, like, not that God doesn't ordain a husband for a wife, but like she has more of like an optional kind of position. And what I'm getting at there, and this is not the point of the video, but is that I believe that God is more displeased with a man if he rejects the wife that God has ordained for him, as opposed to a woman rejecting a man. And I know that sounds like I'm just being biased or whatever, but I'm telling you, as I always do, what I believe the Lord told me. So anyway, that's a side note. So anyway, guy number 2 also was at a juncture, seeking clarity, looking for instruction, direction from God as to what he was supposed to do next, and he received instruction to pursue a wife, right? Now, guy number 3. The conversations that I was having with guy number 3 via email and phone call, he was also telling me that he was at a juncture, seeking clarity and instruction from the Lord as to what his next move was. And so this is the point God told me to make. Men, Adam, if you find yourself at a juncture where you are seeking clarity and direction from the Lord, and however she comes to you, whether the Lord points someone out and tells you to go pursue her, whether she pursues you even though she's not supposed to, whether you two are just brought together somehow, some way, and it's not necessarily that either of you are pursuing each other, it's just that God kind of throws you together, whatever. If in your domain, in some way, shape, or form, a woman all of a sudden is in the picture somehow, some way, pay attention to that, because that just may be your next move. That may be the clarity, the answer to your prayers, the instruction, the direction that God is telling you. God may be telling you your next move is to get married, is to court and get married. Your next move is to take a wife. Now, when I was still dealing with guy number 1, I found this incredibly frustrating. But like now this is almost like laughable to me, of like how silly, how obvious this is now to me. Adam, you're supposed to be the head, which means I would assume that you're supposed to have more clarity with God or whatever. And if I have had to, I don't even know how to phrase this, if I have witnessed this and experienced this with just these 2-3 men, and even guy number 4 that I have not connected, or shall I say reconnected with, because he's someone from my past, God has been talking to me about guy number 4 since July 12th, and he's been telling me that guy number 4 is also seeking clarity, and, well, not so much clarity, I guess, but more so instruction, that this guy number 4 is actually looking for his kingdom wife. Now, guy number 1 and guy number 3, I think, had issues with self-protection and, being afraid of getting hurt and whatever. Guy number 2 more so wanted a wife, and guy number 4, from what God's telling me, wants a wife. Now, I don't know where you're at. You know where you're at. If you don't know where you're at, you need to talk to the Lord about that, okay? But we are in the tribulation. I do believe that God told me that he does not want any of his sons remaining single. Let's go back to Genesis, right? So we are now in the book of Revelation. We are living it. Let's go back to the beginning of the book, Genesis. God himself said, it is not good for man to be alone. Now, the men who are wounded and guarded and self-protecting and, have made agreements that they don't need anybody and are afraid of getting hurt, which is really the root of it, those are the guys who love to cling to how Paul said, oh, well, not everyone is called to get married and blah, blah, blah. Well, let's take a look here. If we're going to see who trumps, is it Paul or is it God himself? I'm going to go with God, right? God said it's not good for man to be alone, and it's definitely not in the tribulation, is what he's told me. Okay. So just because you're not looking for a wife doesn't mean God is not going to lead you to a wife, to find a wife, etc., whatever. But if you're at a juncture and you're frustrated and you're asking God, you're begging God for clarity, you're fasting, you're praying, and you want clarity and you want instruction and you want direction, and all of a sudden, somehow, some way, there's a woman being presented to you, ding, 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 let the light bulb turn on. God is probably saying to you, it's time to get a wife. That's the next move. In order for your ministry and you yourself to continue to progress and move forward and really bloom, right? You have a bud, and when it blossoms, when it starts to actually show the flower, that's blossoming. But when it's in its fullest, potential, it's in full bloom, right? You can't fully bloom without your helpmeet, Eve. And Eve definitely can't bloom without her husband, okay? And I know people are going to argue with me, oh, well, look at Paul, he didn't have a wife, and da-da-da-da, and, he wrote most of the New Testament, da-da-da. Okay, he had a very unique, special, probably one-of-a-kind, no, not probably, he did have a one-of-a-kind purpose, okay? Bottom line, you got to do whatever God tells you, but God told me to come on here and just punctuate this point because it seemed like, yes, Holy Spirit. There was a word given by Vicky Adkins, I believe it was earlier this year. Where are my sons? God is basically saying that a lot of his sons are not letting their light bulb turn on. They're being a little thick-headed. If you're looking for clarity and direction and all of a sudden there's a woman presented to you, pay attention to that. I don't know how else to say it without repeating myself. I'm just... Lord, is there anything else you want me to say? And what's interesting too is, let me just also add the detail of guy number 3. He was not only looking for what his next move was in a general sense, but he was also looking for what his next move was geographically, because he knew that at some point he should be up and leaving where he was living, both in terms of like the household he was living in, but also the geographic, region he was in. And the Lord told me that he was supposed to come to me, which would have gotten him from one part of the country to another. I'm not going to be too specific. And now, I don't know his situation now. I'm not paying attention to him. I'm not in communication with him, whatever. But all I know is he missed out on that opportunity, not just for a wife, but he missed out on the opportunity to go to a different part of the country. Okay, because attached to your spouse is your destiny. So you can't compartmentalize. You can't just, if you're asking God, okay, where and when and how do I move geographically, that may be, and it very much probably, for so many people, it is tied to your kingdom spouse. And I'm not the first person that has said this in the last 2 years on YouTube, because it's true. Guy number 1, I don't want to get into the whole story, so we'll be here forever. But guy number 1, there was, I don't know how specific to be, but he was looking at probably moving to Tennessee, and the Lord had already told me that I was going to Tennessee, and the same region, Eastern Tennessee, right? So and guy number 3, he was on one side of the country and he was looking to probably get to another side of the country, which is where I was. Okay, like pay attention to these things. If all of a sudden you're seeking clarity and you're not getting it and you're seeking direction, you're asking God, what's my next move? What's my next geographical move? And all of a sudden there's a woman in the picture and she's in a different part of the country or whatever. Pay attention to all that. Put the puzzle pieces together. God is saying, go connect with this woman. She is to be your wife. You're to move there or go get her or whatever. People have been talking on YouTube for the last at least 2 years about how God is going to move people around, relocate people for the purpose of connecting with your spouse or whatever, you know. Actually, no, that is a point in itself. People would be moving to meet up with and connect with and court and marry their spouses so that then God could then move you on to ministry together. To me, it's just amazing how guy number 1 and guy number 3 both didn't get it. They're both at a juncture looking at God going, okay, what do I do now? What's next? God presents a woman to them and they run away. Now, that's their own junk. I hope you're not going to do that. But don't be looking at God going, oh, well, you haven't answered my prayer. I'm still waiting on answers. I'm still waiting for clarity. When God said, your next move is getting married, dude. Here's the woman. Your next move is to go to this part of the country and connect with this woman so that she can be your helpmeet, so that you can then move on to blooming in your ministry. And if you're not in ministry right now, quote unquote, because technically we all have purposes that we're supposed to fulfill, then maybe you're supposed to, connect with your wife, and then the Lord's going to reveal to you what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, to an extent, you should have some idea, I would hope. You should have some sense. You may not know all the specifics, but you should have some sense of what at least one of your purposes are. Anyway, that's what the Lord wanted me to just punctuate. It's just, don't be getting all frustrated at God that you're not getting clarity and instruction and direction when He is basically pointing to a woman and saying, it's time to get married. That's your next move. Pay attention. I bless you all in the name of Yeshua, the Christ of Nazareth.